Hey guys, it's Matt. Welcome back to another episode of Even If It's Real, It's Fake. This episode has a very special subtitle. Even if it's fake, it can be very, very real. Now I have to be very careful how I present this. The old guard will say, yeah, I can see that. Can I go back to sleep now? Many of you will say, yeah, I can see that. But for the family members that watch my videos that don't tell me or are afraid to ask me questions, they kind of like lurk in from time to time, or anybody that might stumble upon this, or if this gets into the wrong hands, this is absolute insanity to anybody that doesn't understand knot milk. What I'm about to present is absolute heresy. I have to be very careful. No jokes, at least not in the beginning. The 1951 John Wayne movie is called Operation Pacific. It's about a submarine boat captain who can't win battles or can't sink the enemy ships because his torpedo will not detonate. It's based on real history. During the first 2 years of World War II, the Mark 14 torpedo had all sorts of problems. There's an account, maybe I'll read part of it to you, where 5 in a row were fired at a Japanese freighter ship and none of them detonated. Now, the old guard knows what I'm about to say. And it's so insane if you stumbled upon this video. It's such blasphemy, such heresy to those on the ship of fools that don't understand knot milk that you can't soften up the insane statement coming, so I might as well just say it. Now, for those that hear it, please allow me to defend it on the back end. Do I sound crazy to you, sir? Allow me to defend it on the back end. The old guard knows it was on purpose. What do you mean it's on purpose? What the heck does that mean? Just what I said. It's on purpose. I believe, knowing knot milk, that the Mark 14 torpedo could have likely had a 99% or higher success rate in detonation, instead of having accounts of subcommanders firing 3, 4 at a time that just bounce off the hulls of the ship. And I can basically, without ever being on a submarine, basically without ever taking a submarine course in college or anything, I can just prove it to you right here. So common sense. And if you know knot milk, those in the front row, they want to go back to sleep. They don't even need to see my evidence. Say, Matt, I thought this would be exciting. I want to go back to sleep. Of course, the old guard sees it. Now, those stumbling upon this video that don't know knot milk, that don't understand there's a spiritual adversary here, they're getting very angry with me right now, wanting to throw rotten heads of lettuce and cabbage at me, putting me in one of those medieval things where your head and arms stick through, and you can throw lettuce and tomatoes and stuff in my face. They're getting very angry at me right now, but I can anticipate what they want to say, so I'll answer their question. What do you say? The manufacturer of the torpedo or the powers that be, or even the government, they created it so it would fail on purpose? What are you, some sort of sick individual? Will you allow me to explain, please? See, in my opinion, if the torpedo would have worked the way they easily could have had it work, because World War I was a gigantic testing ground for torpedoes, the U-boat sank, or the German U-boat sank over 6,000 ships. All of World War I was a testing ground for torpedoes. And they knew by the end of World War I why some went off and why others didn't. It would have been completely perfected by the time World War II started. See how that works? See how technology like this is supposed to get better, not worse? But we'll come back to that. You see, it can take up to 2 full years to build a full-size aircraft carrier. It can take up to 3 years to build a full-size battleship during the World War II era. You can't just bang out aircraft carriers one a week, sir, like Twinkies. It takes a long time. I think they knew if the success rate of the Mark 14 torpedo was 99% or more, which is what it should have been, then the war would have been 2 years shorter, because the United States Navy would have been too successful in the first few years of the war, decimating the logistic supply lines of both Germany and Japan, or at least Japan. Germany a little bit different, but you understand what I'm saying, I think. Wait, what do you mean understand what you're saying? What the hell? They were designed not to go off? Yeah, of course. I can prove that. Just stick with me. What do you mean wanted the war? Why wouldn't they want the war to be shorter? No, they don't want the war to be... They created the conditions for war, sir. They didn't want the war to be shorter. It had to be what they intended it to be. How do you think the Germans built the Autobahns and the gigantic factories when they were completely decimated from the World War I reparations and Weimar Republic disaster? Oh, we'll get into all that. Just give me a minute, sir. Do I sound crazy to you? Let me just read you one little snippet of one of hundreds of historical accounts that I could produce for you. Daspit, that's the captain of the submarine. Daspit fired 2 more torpedoes at the Japanese tanker as his submarine turned away. The sonar man reported that both weapons seemed to hit and then stop. As his sub raced eastward, Daspit wrote of the frustrating hunt in his log, quote, "I find it hard to convince myself that I saw this." He had no explanation for why the torpedoes failed to explode. Out of 15 Mark 14 torpedoes fired, only 2 had detonated, and those had been fired from what was considered to be a very oblique angle. The others were so carefully set up as to be right out of the textbook, yet not one of the Mark 14 torpedoes had done its job. Retired Admiral Charles A. Lockwood actually was a technical and naval advisor for the John Wayne movie and said, quote, "There was a great deal of truth in the film's portrayal of our torpedo problems. It cost us dearly," end quote. What, yes, question in the back? Yeah, a crazy man that's narrating this crazy man. Can you go back to what you were saying, that crazy notion that they didn't want the war to end early? A functioning torpedo could have ended the war earlier, but you're even saying the U.S. government wanted it to go on as long as it did. Are you insane, sir? Are you an asylum escapee? Well, let me answer the question. Okay, and stick with this presentation. Of course they didn't want it to end early. They created the conditions for it, sir. How do you think Hitler came to power? By setting up lemonade stands and raising money that way? How do you think the Autobahns were created in the gigantic German infrastructure when they should have been completely decimated after World War I and the Treaty of Versailles and all the damn reparations and trillions of dollars in today's dollars that they would have had to pay out? All right, let me return to the absolute common sense basics. In World War I, not II, German U-boats sank over 6,600 Allied and neutral ships. 6,000 plus ships sank with torpedoes by German U-boats in World War I, with losses totaling more than 12 million tons of cargo and shipping. The submarines were particularly effective during the campaigns of unrestricted submarine warfare in 1917, when Allied ship production struggled to keep up with the massive losses. Now remember what I said earlier about World War I being a gigantic testing ground for submarine warfare in general and torpedoes. Just the Germans were responsible for 6,600 Allied and neutral ships. How do you think all those ships were taken down? You think they just had Frogman leap in the water and do a Mark Spitz? They just did a Michael Phelps and they swam over to the holes of the ships, and then they just, with a sticky bomb that we learned from Saving Private Ryan in a sock, they stuck a bomb to the side and then swam back? No, every single one, torpedoes. So the torpedo was, let me get this straight, was perfected in 1917. In 1917, when a German U-boat shot it, it went boom, boom. But in the start of World War II, they didn't know what they were doing. Yeah, I guess you have to be one of those conspiracy people. And you people never have any evidence. You just all talk. Uh-oh, what's this? Henry Ford of Ford Motor Company receiving the Grand Cross of the German Eagle from Nazi officials July 30th, 1938 on his 75th birthday. Why do you think he getting the Grand Cross from the Nazis? You think because he just shipped one of his cars over to Adolf and Adolf said, "I like the way this drives. Send him the cross." No, because Ford produced the engines for about 1/3 of the entire Nazi war machine. How did that happen? After World War I, they're supposed to be punished with the reparations and the Weimar shit. How did that happen? Uh-oh. Hey, look at this. Wall Street and the rise of Adolf. The astonishing true story of the American financiers who bankrolled the Nazis. They did? With us? By Anthony C. Sutton. So this book, as well as many other sources, will tell you not just Ford Motor Company, but AT&T was in there helping build out the infrastructure, and IBM was in there, and all these American companies and global companies were in there. They were in there helping Adolf build out this gigantic infrastructure, including the construction of all the Autobahns. But I don't understand. This don't make sense. After World War I, the world came together. Remember, they formed the League of Nations, and those useless idiots in this case, and the League of Nations said, "We will never let this happen again. And then we're going to come together. We're going to prevent world wars. And then right after the League of Nations said it would never happen again, World War II broke out. They were highly effective in that League of Nations, and that led to an even more degenerate bunch, which is called the United Nations. But we'll talk about that some other time. But see, the point is, League of Nations, they were overseeing the punishment against Germany for World War I. They said this will never happen again. So there was, like in today's dollars, like $1 trillion of punitive punishment. And they were already effed over from Weimar. Remember their currency just inflated so much you had to use an entire wheelbarrow full of currency to get a bologna and cheese sandwich? Remember that? And then by the time you ate the bologna and cheese sandwich, they said, we need one more wheelbarrow. Remember those horseshit stories? You got to go get another wheelbarrow of cash because your bologna and cheese just doubled. It doubled in 2 minutes. I snuffed it down. In 2 minutes, it doubled. Remember that bullshit? What a bunch of horseshit. So they're already devastated from not Weimar. In Philly, it's Weimar. Around the rest of the world, it's Weimar. They were already devastated, and then $1 trillion of additional punitive and reparations after World War I, yet they were able in a 20-year period to build out this gigantic military infrastructure. This is 100%. The powers that be in this world created the conditions for World War II. There is not even another side to take on it. Okay, here you go. The hyperinflation in the Weimar Republic primarily occurred between 1922 and 1923, peaking in 1923, before being stabilized by the Rentenmark. I guess that was a replacement currency, so you didn't have to bring a whole wheelbarrow full of shit to get a bologna and cheese sandwich. Okay, 1922, the hyperinflation. It was the equivalent of $40,000 to buy one banana. You've all heard the stories, right? Okay, that was 4 years, say, after the end of World War I. So World War I ends, their entire military infrastructure, every factory is decimated, millions dead, and then on top of that, you have the whole finance of the country up to 4 to 5 years later in complete smoldering ruin because of hyperinflation and replacement currencies. So basically, 15 years before the start of World War II, the entire country, including its financial system, is in ashes. Remember that, folks. The crisis was a result, the hyperinflation was a result of Germany's massive war debts from World War I and the Treaty of Versailles. There it is. Took place in the Hall of Mirrors. But you have to be one of those conspiracy people to read into that, which led the government to print vast amounts of money to pay its obligations. Print money to pay its That's what they do today. That's why that loaf of bread was $12. But we'll talk about that some other time. They did that back then with us, causing the papier mark to rapidly lose its value. Oh, that papier mark, that was that piece of shit. You had to bring in whole wheelbarrows full of that shit to get the bologna and cheese sandwich. And then the Rentenmark, that was backed by the world's corporations and the one world system. So then that stabilized. And then Mr. Adolf came in, and just 15 years, they built out the entire German infrastructure. Where just before the war, this is just about 12 years of building, they were pushing out 2 to 1 in terms of planes built over the West, 2 to 1 in terms of tanks built and military infrastructure, 2 to 1 in terms of U-boats, submarines, ships, 2 to 1 over the entire West. But let me get this straight. They just did it on their own. They didn't get any help from Western corporations. And I guess you'd have to be one of those conspiracy people to say that World War II was planned. Yeah, the facts don't line up with the conspiracy people. They're just all, as you would say, out to lunch. Look at this, and I'll show you a picture in just a moment. The first sections of the German Autobahn network were built in the late 20s and early 30s. They were built right over Weimar hyperinflation? That fucking concrete must have cost an arm and a leg. With the first completed section opening in 1932 between Cologne and Bonn. However, blah, blah, oh, forget that. Let's go right to the picture. Okay, look at this horse shit right here. There's one car every 5 miles. They said the Autobahns were emptier upon their initial construction than the furrowed tunnels are today. Just one car every 4 or 5 miles. You wouldn't think these were built for military infrastructure, to be able to move military infrastructure all over the country so you could wage wars on multiple fronts. No, you'd have to be one of those people. It's like when they said they built all the massive highways out in Los Angeles starting in the late 40s through the 50s, 6-lane highways, and there'd be like one car. Like, what's all this for? Well, it's all planned out. They knew what they were doing. Well, it was great driving around in the 50s, one or two cars, but then those 6 lanes were jammed packed just 20 years later. Okay, back to the hyperinflation. There's some truth to this because Notnook planned every bit of it. At the bottom it says, in 1923, hyperinflation in Germany became so extreme that prices doubled every 2 days. They doubled every 2 days, eventually leading people to burn money because blah, 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 blah. So some guy's piling up all that cash. And he says, one Tic Tac, please. One Tic. No, you don't have enough here. You got to bring more cash. You ain't get the whole box of Tic Tacs. I want a Coke. You ain't get no Coke. This doesn't make any sense because people would have had a certain amount in the bank, right? Or under their pillow, or that doesn't just double automatically like the price of the bologna and cheese sandwich. It doesn't make sense. This may have gone on for a week or two before everything would have collapsed. They make it seem the Notnook stories are, let's just say, a little exaggerated to cement in their fake history. See, if prices doubled every 2 days, people have a fixed amount. It's called savings, or what they have at home or in a bank. That doesn't just automatically double, right? Oh, I'm at the savings rate on the... Oh yeah, they just readjusted the bank would be so kind to readjust the rate on your savings to go to 90%, then 400%. So you put $1 in the bank, you're making a lot of money, but that's not keeping up with the bologna and cheese sandwiches. Come on, this happened, but it's never like what they say. I mean, there's the whole thing would have been if any of this happened, the whole infrastructure would have froze up in 5 to 7 days. Let's take a fun break for just a minute to see what would happen to a fully loaded Chevy Suburban, top of the line, if it was sold in the Weimar Republic in 1923. Top right, I don't know if you can see that. It says $97,000 Why do you need the extra seven? If you're collecting $97,000, do you really need the extra 75? I'm not paying the extra 75. That you don't get no Suburban. You need the extra $75 if you're collecting 97,000. So let's do it. Weimar Republic, 2 days later, it's 194,000. What is it? 2 days later, it's 194,000. But it's not just doubling on the 97, it's doubling on itself. 2 days after that, this car is $388,000. 2 days after that, this car is $776,000 just over 1 week. What does the salesman say? Sir, Mr. Smith, I wouldn't wait if I were you. Well, I don't like to make quick decisions. I wouldn't wait if I were you. He comes back 8 days later, it's $776,000, sir. It was 97. Now it's over 700,000. Haven't you seen what's happening to our currency, sir? You should have bought last week, you idiot. The caption of this picture is cut off, so I'll read it to you. It says, a Mark 14 torpedo on display in San Francisco's Fisherman's Wharf. See that couple walking around Fisherman's Wharf there to our top left? Say they just got some nice fish and chips. Well, that's a terrible example because according to the Metal Leo channel, everything's now closed. He goes around to all the different shopping districts all over San Francisco and just says, closed, closed, it's all closed. It's just homeless people pooping all over the sidewalks. So this is a bad example. Say it's 1985 and Fisherman's Wharf was, say, what it once was, and they just had some nice fish and chips in San Francisco's Fisherman's Wharf, and they're walking up and it's their first date, and say he's one of us, and it's their first date, and he says, look, that's the famous Mark 14 torpedo, which was said to be a lemon, and it didn't work right in the beginning of World War II. And she says, why would they display a torpedo here at Fisherman's Wharf, a weapon of death? And then remember, he's one of us, and he turns to her on the first date, and he says, because the Notnook likes to show off its dastardly deeds and schemes. And she's the what? The not what? The not milk? No, the Notnook. It's proud of what it did. What do you mean what it did? Well, see, that torpedo was designed on purpose not to work properly, so World War II would be extended. And she says, you think that? And she says, I have to go to the bathroom. Oh, I'll wait right here. An hour later, he's still waiting there. A little bit of advice. If you're one of us, don't ever talk about our stuff on first dates. She'll run like the wind, man. The Mark 14 torpedo was the United States Navy's standard submarine-launched anti-ship torpedo of World War II. This weapon was plagued with many problems which crippled its performance early in the war. It was supplemented by the Mark 18 electric torpedo in the last 2 years of the war. From December 1941 to November 1943, the Mark 14 and the destroyer-launched Mark 15 torpedo had numerous technical problems that took almost 2 years to fix. After the fixes, the Mark Mark 14 played a major role in the devastating blow the U.S. Navy submarines dealt to the Japanese naval and merchant marine forces during the Pacific War. So it dealt a devastating blow that obviously they didn't want dealt during the first 2 years of the war. The very first paragraph of Wikipedia, 80% of it is about the problems with the Mark 14. And it took, let me get this straight, it took we'll look at the technical problems more in just a minute. It took 2 years to fix? Really? When submarine torpedo technology was basically, for the most part, in terms of the reliability of it exploding, perfected during World War I in those piece of shit U-boats. Let's see what bullshit explanation it gives those on the Ship of Fools so they don't have to believe the conspiracy people. You could tell the Ship of Fools basically anything at this point, that aliens came down and messed with the trigger mechanism. That way nobody planned on these failures to happen. Don't ever believe the conspiracy people. This is almost like saying aliens did it. This is just as ridiculous. Torpedoes were sophisticated and expensive, but they didn't work. The cost of a torpedo in 1931 was about $10,000, equivalent to $207,000 in 2024. Well, now they're $1 million a pop, but we'll talk about that some other time. The development of the Mark 13, Mark 14, and Mark 15 torpedoes was done frugally. Oh, because they're trying to save. You'll see. They worry about your taxpayer money. The military especially does. You'll see. The Navy did not want to do They didn't want to do live test fires, it says, that would destroy a $10,000 torpedo because the military has proven they care about keeping costs down, as they always have. What was I thinking? Why would anybody believe the conspiracy people? The Navy was also reluctant to supply target ships because that costs money. Consequently, there were no live test fires. No live fire tests. Sorry. And the designers had to rely on their judgment. Oh, this is, I often say the words insult to my and our intelligence. I don't even know what to classify this. There's not one person in the history of the world that should believe this. This sometimes led to problems. Yeah, not testing something could lead to problems? No. A contact exploder that worked reliable at 30 knots had failed at 46 knots. In addition, the Navy had limited experience in using torpedoes in combat. Did you really just say that? I had not read that. We do this together on the fly. In addition, the Navy had limited experience in using torpedoes in combat. The Wikipedia bot that somehow took their information from the Pentagon, you should be ashamed of yourself. Over 6,000 kills alone just by the German U-boats. I mean, this is, I don't even know what to say. I mean, usually it's funny, but I'm kind of a little pissed off. From warfarehistorynetwork.com. So began the litany of problems with the Navy's technical marvel, the Mark 14 torpedo. In the first months of World War II, American subs fired 97 torpedoes at enemy shipping. Only 3 were sunk. Some failed to explode, while others, even though aimed with care, seemed to miss or run under their target. Even worse, several had blown up before hitting the side of a Japanese ship. 97 fired at the enemy and only 3 were sunk. But Matt, this is unfair. You can't expect a military to actually test their equipment out before it's used in actual battles and combat. They worry about overspending. They care about proper use of the taxpayer dollar. I think, you know what? I'm going to shut this video down and probably remove the entire channel. I think we're being a little tough on the military. But don't they have the $400 toilet seats and the $76,000 hammers and shit? And it's like a requisition form, 1 pack of M&Ms, $40,000. Somebody spent $40,000 on M&Ms once. I'm sure it happened. That's nothing. But they care about your money, and they would never test anything. That's what they're expecting us to believe. But then when we go tell our friends and family and cousins and neighbors about this, we're just one of those people. Just in case there was so much cognitive dissonance in those listening to me, let me repeat one more time what was read just a few minutes ago, starting with the development. The development of the Mark 13, Mark 14, and Mark 15 torpedoes was done frugally. The Navy did not want to do live fire tests that would destroy a $10,000 torpedo. The Navy was also reluctant to supply target ships because that costs money as well. This is so unbelievable, I don't even know how to make a joke about it. Let's move on. In 1923, more than 15 years before the start of World War II, from the United States perspective, Congress made NTS Newport the sole designer, developer, builder, and tester of torpedoes in the United States. No independent or competing group was assigned to verify the results of Mark 14 tests. See, the ship of fools people will latch on to this. They need a way to explain it away. They'll say, look, Matt, it was cronyism as usual. It was corruption. It wasn't the grand conspiracy that you guys say it was. It's just corruption, and the contract went to NTS, who probably paid off the people in Congress who pick the procurement and pick the suppliers, just the way Ward and Norton was offered that little envelope inside Macy's pie or whatever in Shawshank. It's just corruption, Matt. It's as old as human history. It's not the grand conspiracy you dummies say it is. The people in the ship of fools will always latch on to something like this so they have a way out and they can go sleep really well at night and they don't have the cognitive dissonance. Look, Jeff, here comes that number that always pops up in our research. I'll get to it and there'll be an oh no. The Navy had not learned from the torpedo supply lessons of World War I. They didn't learn their lessons. Looking back in 1953, the Bureau of Ordnance stated, quote, production planning in the pre-war years was also faulty. Torpedoes were designed for meticulous, small-scale manufacture when you just got finished World War I? What? When military requirements demanded that they be supplied in large numbers, a series of new problems was exposed. There were simply no realistic plans available for providing the weapon in adequate quantity. You just got done something called World War I. That ain't the Boston Massacre with 5 sons of bitches shooting people on the street. World War I, but you didn't have any idea you needed a bigger supply? What the heck? We thought the League of Nations would do its job. And there would never be another war again. There was little interest in torpedo production until, oh no, 1933, when the Vincent shipbuilding, guys, what I'm doing here is completely irrelevant. Maybe it will be Midnight Reality Saturday. This is an exercise in fluid reality itself. Okay, this isn't just uncovering something that was never. No, this is pretty much reality showing me what I expect to find. But let's just stick to the first level. We're uncovering something where this torpedo likely it was designed to keep the war going longer, and that's what the facts line up, at least to the conspiracy investigator. But we find that this is much, in terms of that level, what we've been doing is irrelevant. It's the reality lesson in and of itself, which will be more important, which I'm not sure we'll get to till Saturday. I can't do any more on this, guys. Reality, it will just keep coming endlessly, and that's a fake world, folks, which is the greatest news of all time to us. Thanks for listening.